I still remember the sound of her laugh, sharp, polished, rehearsed for years. It wasn't the laugh of warmth, but of dismissal. "Dreams don't pay bills, Maya," she used to say, swirling her tea like she was stirring my limits into it. My mother believed in practicality, in repetition, in keeping your head down and your hands busy. I believed in something she couldn't touch: potential. The war between us started long before I ever earned a paycheck. It started the day I said I wanted more than survival. The kitchen always smelled like compromise: boiled lentils, reheated routines. While she folded laundry in the corner, she'd remind me how her life was built on responsibility. I'd stare at her cracked hands and think responsibility looked too much like regret. "Art school?" she repeated one night, eyebrows raised so high they could have punctured heaven. "Do you think we're the kind of people who can afford hobbies?" I didn't answer, because I knew what she meant. We weren't the kind of people who got to dream. When I worked double shifts at the cafe, saving scraps of tips for design software, she'd sneer at my exhaustion. "All this for what? To draw logos for shampoo bottles?" I'd nod silently, pouring another cup of instant coffee. I learned early that defending a dream to someone who's forgotten theirs is like explaining color to someone who's gone blind. She wasn't cruel, not exactly. She was just convinced that mediocrity was safety. Years passed in that loop, me chasing sparks, her smothering flames. When my first freelance client paid me $50 for a logo, I danced around our living room. She watched from the sofa, unimpressed. "That's not real work, Maya. Real work gives you a pension." She spoke like pensions were poems, things that promised security but never delivered beauty. I wanted to scream, but instead I smiled, pocketed the cash, and told myself one day I'd show her. That day came disguised as a rejection letter. Every design firm I applied to said the same thing: no openings. Mom framed each no as confirmation of her prophecy. "See? You should have studied nursing like your cousin. At least she wears a uniform." I didn't reply. Instead, I started my own page. One post, one design, one quiet rebellion at a time. I named it Blueprint, because that's what I lacked. A plan, yet I was determined to draw one myself. The first time a brand messaged me for collaboration, I stayed up all night sketching drafts. The next morning, she found me asleep at my desk. "You'll ruin your health before you earn a dime," she muttered. But when that campaign went viral, when my design was plastered on billboards downtown, she said nothing, just watched the screen with a face that couldn't decide between pride and panic. I started earning, slowly, then all at once. Clients doubled, then tripled. Rent checks no longer frightened me. I moved out of our crumbling 2-room apartment into a small studio with light that didn't flicker. Mom didn't visit much. When she did, she'd circle the place, touch the sleek furniture, and comment, "You're lucky, Maya." People waste years chasing this kind of stability. I wanted to tell her it wasn't luck, it was hunger. The kind that keeps you awake through heartbreak and caffeine crashes. Then came the storm. She fell ill one winter. Nothing dramatic at first, just fatigue that lingered. The doctor's words, "early kidney failure," landed like a verdict. The treatments were expensive, and her pension dreams evaporated under fluorescent hospital lights. I didn't hesitate. I paid every bill. I sat through every consultation, signing forms she didn't have the strength to read. She'd look at me from the bed sometimes, eyes softer than I remembered. "You shouldn't waste your money on me," she whispered. I wanted to laugh. Waste? On the woman who had mocked my every step? The irony was cruel, but life has an impeccable sense of timing. I didn't remind her of her words. I didn't need to. Every beep of the hospital monitor was a silent rebuttal to the years she doubted me. I'd become her safety net, the same net she said didn't exist for dreamers. When she came home, weak but recovering, I moved her into my apartment. She resisted at first. Out of pride or habit, I couldn't tell. "I don't want to be a burden," she said. I smiled. "You taught me about responsibility, remember? Let me return the favor." Our roles reversed overnight. I cooked, I managed her medications, I handled her finances. She watched me on video calls with clients from New York, Singapore, London. The same daughter she'd once accused of chasing illusions now funded her dialysis, her groceries, her everything. She'd sit by the window while I worked, quiet, tracing the rim of her teacup. Once she murmured, "You're doing well." I didn't reply. The words were a decade late, and apologies disguised as compliments never arrive on time. Still, I couldn't hate her. Not fully, because every doubt she cast had become fuel. Every mockery had forged resilience. Without her disbelief, I might have settled somewhere halfway between dream and duty, but she made me pick a side. The day my company hit its first $1 million revenue, the accountant called in disbelief. I just stared at my reflection in the office glass wall. Same eyes, same stubborn jaw, but a different fire. That night, I told Mom over dinner. She smiled faintly. $1 million in design? The sentence was half admiration, half disbelief. Yes, I said, in design. She nodded, then looked down at her plate. Maybe I was too hard on you. I reached across the table, covered her hand with mine. Maybe you were exactly what I needed. She laughed, softer this time, almost human. Your father used to say I was born with worry lines. And I erased them with profit margins, I teased. For a fleeting second, we were just mother and daughter again. Not adversaries, not cautionary tales. But guilt has a way of lingering longer than illness. She started buying me small gifts. Scarves I'd never wear, kitchen gadgets I didn't need, as if trying to repay an unpayable debt. I told her she didn't have to. She didn't believe me. Old habits die stubbornly. She'd slip a few notes from her pension savings into my purse, a futile rebellion against dependence. I'd quietly put them back in her wallet the next day. Months passed. The business grew. She stabilized, at least physically. Yet sometimes I'd catch her watching me with that look. The mixture of pride and pain that only comes when a parent realizes their child outgrew every limitation they set. You've become the woman I wanted to be, she confessed one evening. The admission caught me off guard. Then why did you try to stop me? She sighed. Because I couldn't bear to see you fail the way I did. I didn't know whether to hug her or walk away. Failure, I realized, isn't contagious. Fear is. When the National Entrepreneurship Council invited me to speak at a summit, I hesitated. Public speeches weren't my thing. But she insisted, you should go. Tell them your story. I wanted to ask, which version? The one where she mocked my efforts, or the one where she now lived on my income? But I went. Standing under the bright lights, I saw faces that looked just like mine had years ago. Tired, uncertain, hopeful. I told them about starting from nothing, about fighting the kind of doubt that wears a mother's voice. When I stepped off stage, my phone buzzed. A message from her. You made me proud today. For once, I believed her. She moved slower after that. The illness didn't steal her spirit all at once. It chipped away, quietly, like the way time erodes a mountain. I caught her watching me more often, as if memorizing proof that I had survived the fire she'd lit. One afternoon, as sunlight slid across the hardwood floor, she said something that stayed with me. I used to think you were reckless, she whispered, her voice barely louder than the hum of the air purifier. Now I think you were brave. It wasn't an apology, but it was close enough. The truth is, I never wanted her to suffer. I just wanted her to see me. Not as a rebellion, not as a disappointment, but as a woman who refused to shrink. There's a strange peace that comes with finally realizing your parents' cruelty was just fear wearing discipline's mask. It makes forgiveness easier, not because they deserve it, but because you do. When she slipped back into the hospital months later, the doctors warned me gently. Prepare for a long stay. I moved my meetings online. My team handled clients while I handled nurses, prescriptions, and insurance codes. Between emails, I'd brush her hair, soft as spider silk now, and read her the kind comments people left under my designs. They love you, she said once, eyes heavy with morphine. No, I answered. They love what I built. She smiled faintly. Same thing, isn't it? Maybe it was. The night she passed, I wasn't in the room. I'd stepped out to get coffee because even grief has its errands. When I came back, the monitor was silent, her body still. On the bedside table sat a note written in her small, uneven script. You proved me wrong beautifully. I cried for hours, not because she was gone, but because she finally understood. All those years I'd chased validation, and it arrived like a whisper in an empty hospital room. I kept that note, framed it above my desk. It reminds me that sometimes victory doesn't roar. Sometimes it sighs. Months later, I found myself sitting across from a board of investors, discussing expansion. They wanted to buy 40% of Blueprint. I smiled politely, declined, and walked out. Money wasn't the goal anymore. Freedom was. The kind of freedom that lets you say no without shaking. I used part of my profits to open a foundation. Scholarships for women with big dreams and small support systems. Every brochure carried a single line under the logo. Dreams don't pay bills, they build them. My team didn't know that was her quote. Twisted into truth. My days became rhythm again. Design meetings, client calls, silent dinners. Success can be loud from the outside, but quiet when you live inside it. I thought I'd reached peace until one morning, a letter arrived, handwritten, sealed in navy wax. It was from my aunt. Your mother's old house, it began, has been sitting empty. The neighborhood's changing. Maybe you should sell it, I didn't reply. Instead, I drove there on a rainy Sunday. The walls still smelled faintly of cumin and damp dreams. I walked through every room, tracing memories like scars. In my old bedroom, the wallpaper peeled where my vision board used to hang. I knelt, ran my fingers over the cracked plaster, and whispered, "You see, Mom? This was the blueprint all along." Before I left, I opened her wardrobe, empty except for a shoebox tucked in the corner. Inside were newspaper clippings of my interviews, screenshots of my designs, even a printed photo from my first billboard campaign. She'd been keeping track in secret, cheering for me in silence. That discovery broke me in ways her words never could. I didn't sell the house. I turned it into an art residency for young designers who couldn't afford space to create. We called it the Seed Room. Every summer, 10 students fill it with ideas, laughter, and late-night coffee stains. I tell them stories about failure, not success, because that's what builds muscle memory for persistence. Sometimes I stay there overnight, sitting by the window where she once folded laundry. I can almost hear her voice, critical, then cautious, then gone. It doesn't haunt me anymore. It teaches me. The rhythm of her scolding became the metronome of my ambition. The irony is poetic. The woman who mocked my efforts now funds every dream that blooms under this roof. Through me, through my income. Last winter, a reporter asked during an interview, "What motivates you now?" I paused, thought of her, and said, "Legacy without bitterness." He didn't understand, but that's fine. Not every audience needs the director's cut. On my way home that evening, I stopped at the florist. White lilies, her favorite. I placed them under her photograph in my living room. The city lights flickered through the glass, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I was performing for her approval. I was living mine. Leo, my son, tugged at my sleeve. "Grandma would have liked your new office, right?" he asked. I smiled. She'd have complained about the color, but yes, she'd like it. He laughed, satisfied with the balance between truth and love. Later that night, I opened my laptop, scrolling through Blueprint's latest campaign, an initiative teaching single mothers digital design skills. We called it Reframe, because that's what survival truly is, changing the picture without throwing away the frame. I watched clips of them learning, laughing, rebuilding. For a moment, I saw my mother in each of them, sharp tongues, soft hearts, terrified of hope. I realized then that success isn't about proving people wrong. It's about transforming their wrongness into something right for someone else. I closed the laptop, leaned back, and whispered to the quiet room, "You see, Mom? We're both still working." The next morning, my accountant called again. Routine check-in. "Maya, you've officially crossed 8 figures this quarter," he said, disbelief softening his tone. I laughed softly. "Tell the team we'll celebrate quietly, because loud victories fade. Quiet ones last." That evening, I visited her grave. The headstone was simple. Evelyn Carter, loved fiercely, feared softly. I brushed the leaves away, placed a single design pen beside the flowers. "You always said art was a luxury," I whispered. "Turns out it's a lifeline." The wind caught my words, carried them somewhere only she could hear. As I walked back toward my car, phone buzzing with client emails, I thought about how strange full circles feel. You start by begging for belief, and you end by realizing you never needed it. The woman who mocked my efforts may have left this world, but she lives on. Through every invoice I sign, every salary I pay, every student I mentor. She lives on my income, my legacy, my resilience. And if she's watching somewhere, I hope she's smiling. Not because I proved her wrong, but because I learned how to build peace out of her doubt.